So someone just put up the link for the list of the 50 most influential business people of color in the chat. So why don't we begin? Just so people know, there are over 400 registrants today. I guess someone just said there's 160 of us on the screen right now, and I suspect, especially with Zoom, people will be coming and going. So maybe we should formally begin.
Okay. Well, I'm Gretchen Cook Anderson, a board member of the Needham Diversity Initiative, the organization sponsoring the summit today. Welcome.
And I'm Rebecca Drill, Vice President of the Needham Diversity Initiative, and thank you so much for so many people joining us for our 9th annual Needham Diversity Summit.
This year, our world is shaken by two pandemics. One, a novel virus, the other, the persistent scourge of racial injustice. Both emerged as the most pivotal issues facing our country and our electorate at the polls during arguably our nation's most divisive presidential election. We're left now to heal the delicate social fabric of our communities and finally realize the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all.
So today we're coming together of community. And as I said, we might have over 400 people at some points during the day. And coming together as a community is something that is so important these days, as Gretchen mentioned, both because of the pandemic and because of what's been going on with racial injustice and really trying to keep united during all of this. So this totally ties in with our theme of today's summit, which is hate has no home here, beyond yard signs. We chose this theme because in the last 4 years, especially this past year, so many people have been saying, I give money, I have yard signs, but I feel the need to do more this time. What can I do? How can I do it? So we hope you leave this afternoon with some ideas on what your next steps can be.
Friends and neighbors, as we do each year, I'll share our expectations for an occasion today in which everyone will feel welcomed, included, celebrated, and respected. To help achieve this, we ask that all respect and adhere to clear norms that we hope will foster constructive conversations and a safe space for everyone to express themselves. Let's all practice active and intent listening to truly hear what others are saying. Let's participate with empathy and bring all our humanity into our time together.
And before we begin the formal program, we want to take a moment to pay tribute to David Summergrad, who is a co-founder of the Needham Diversity Initiative and president of the Needham Diversity Initiative, and who recently passed away. For those of you who don't know him, he was a fearless advocate of justice and fairness for everyone. And for those of you who know him, you know this about him. He was a lifelong educator. He was a teacher, a principal, a college instructor, and he is the epitome of our theme today, beyond yard signs, taking action. David spent his life doing that work, not just talking about it. This was his passion. So in Needham alone, in addition to the Needham Diversity Initiative, he was involved in 30 Actions, which was a forerunner to NDI. He single-handedly started College Bound, a volunteer group that helps Needham high school students of color with college applications. And he was very involved in another organization called At Your Neighbor's Table, which is a community conversation over dinner about equity, diversity, and inclusion. His untimely death is a loss to the entire community. And I just want to note that we will share a Google form in the chat to collect stories and memories of David, and we will plan to share that with his family. So please feel free to put any of your thoughts and memories into the chat, into the Google form.
When Great Trees Fall by Maya Angelou. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder. Lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence, their senses eroded beyond fear. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly. Our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory, suddenly sharpened, examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, promised walks never taken. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent upon their nurture, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms, slowly and always irregularly. Spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration, our senses restored, never to be the same. Whisper to us, they existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. Rest in power, my friend.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Gretchen. So it's a very hard transition, but I wanted to say a few logistics before we get started with the day. So this is the first year we are holding the summit virtually. So please be patient with us if there are technological glitches. None of us are IT people professionally. Please mute yourself when you're not presenting. And some presentations will be recorded, but not the breakout sessions, as we want to create a safe space for people to feel free to speak openly.
We also want to briefly share a teaser about our next Needham Diversity Initiative event on December 8th at 7:30. Join us for a special discussion about Trial 4, the new Netflix documentary limited series about former Needham Public Schools student Sean Ellis. Sean spent 22 years in prison at the center of a wrongful conviction story involving the murder of a Boston police officer. Sean graced us last year as a panelist at our summit. Learn more about Sean's case, his release, and his new life from Needham resident Stephanie Hartung, a board member of the New England Innocence Project.
As we proceed to the day, I'm going to introduce Allie Rayfield, who will be our tech leader for today, and she'll provide some information about how the technology will work today. I do want to say that Allie will always remain in the main Zoom room, even when there are breakout sessions, and so will I. Allie will be available for technological glitches, and I'll be available for any questions about the NDI in general or the summit. And now, Allie.
Great. Hi, everybody. I just spotlighted myself. Thumbs up if you can see me. Okay, great. That means the technology is working so far, which is a good thing. But I'm in charge of technology. I'll be behind the scenes, moving the slides around, also making sure that if anyone has any needs or technical support needs, please reach out to me. You can do that in the chat. My name is listed as Technical Support Allie. Also, please set your Zoom view to speaker view. It's the most ideal because we will have multiple people speaking. We have a panel coming in a little bit, and that view, you can find it on the top right of your screen. You should have options that say speaker view, side-by-side gallery view. Use the side-by-side gallery view. That will help you, and I'll be spotlighting our speakers also, so don't worry about it if it does feel overwhelming. Please hold questions till the end of our sessions, or feel free to use the chat. You guys have been doing that great so far. And just like Rebecca mentioned, the main sessions will be recorded, but the breakout rooms will not be recorded. And one thing, go ahead, Rebecca, were you going to say something?
Oh, sorry. When you're done, I also want to publicly thank our co-sponsors. So I can wait, sorry. Okay, great.
Yeah, so one quick technology reminder. We're going to be moving into breakout rooms later on in the day. And for the most ideal the ability to move into those breakout rooms, we do have to have the updated version. So during our break, I'll remind you again to go into your Zoom, make sure you have version 5.4.2, and that will make things a lot easier for you when we do have to go into breakout rooms. So I'm going to go back. Actually, Rebecca, if you want to address the sponsors, and then I'll hand it over to you and I'll also move to our next speaker when you're done.
Thank you. So I just wanted to publicly acknowledge our speakers, our co-sponsors, Metco Needham Parent Council, Needham High School Safe, Students Advocating for Family, Needham Free Public Library, the Needham Human Rights Committee, Progressive Needham, Needham Special Education Parent Advisory Council, and Equal Justice Needham. So really want to support all of them as well, and they totally support us. Thank you. And now we're going to have a few words from Becca RALLA, our state senator. Becca has been an avid supporter all of these many years, and we are thrilled that she's here to be able to say a few words to us. Welcome, Becca.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's so great to be with all of you today. I want to say, of course, a huge thanks to Gretchen and to Rebecca, our people of all things good, and just tremendous advocates in our community, and such deeply valued and respected voices. And everyone at NDI who made today possible. I'm so glad that everybody figured out a way to do this, even though it looks different than it normally looks. We're all adapting, of course, and certainly have spent months adapting, and will continue to do so as things move forward here over the next several months, particularly as we head into the colder weather. I do want to say, David was a close family friend. David and my mom actually went to grade school together more years ago than either of them would want me to say out loud. But my first interaction with David was, as an adult actually, was at this summit in 2017. So his loss is deeply felt for me personally, deeply felt for us as a community. And frankly, the fact that there are over 200 people assembled virtually on a Sunday afternoon in November to continue this work is a tribute and testament to his legacy. So deep thanks again to Gretchen, Rebecca, and everyone who made today happen, including all of the speakers that are coming up in this incredible program. These are divisive times. And that's not just the case in Georgia or Nevada or Arizona or Texas or other places around the country. It's divisive right here. And this summit is a really important part of us being able to heal those wounds and come together as a community and be real and honest with each other about the fact that Needham is not immune, nor is any other town or city nationwide, from systemic racism, from identity-based discrimination and injustices, and from the work that we must do to continue to chip away at all of these issues and to bring us back together as a broad community. I mean, that's what community is, after all. It's a huge part of why my family and I picked Needham as a place to raise our children. And I'm so deeply honored and privileged to be able to do that work, representing Needham and other communities in the state Senate. And I will, of course, be continuing to do that work diligently with Representative Garlick and Senator Rush. The three of us make up the Needham delegation, with all of my colleagues in the House and in the Senate. and I won't go into details about that, but I encourage all of you to reach out if you have any questions about the work that we are doing, and if you have ideas about other things that we should be doing, please let me know. Because I certainly don't profess to have all the ideas in the room, and I don't think any of us do. So please do reach out. I will put my contact information into the chat. And I just want to thank, again, everyone who made today possible. Take just another brief moment to remember David and everything that he gave to us as a community. And in particular, extend my thanks to the 210 people, all of you who are on this Zoom right now, for taking time out of your busy schedules and out of your weekends to devote to diversity and community and addressing the systemic challenges that we so desperately must address. So thank you so much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. So I see that Denise Garlick is here too. And Denise, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that you were coming. And we invited you. I'm so glad you're here. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you spontaneously want to say a few words as well? Denise is our state representative.
So I would like to very much thank you for that opportunity. And good morning to everybody who is here. I just want to thank the Needham Diversity Initiative. I think our strength is that we are many years into this work. And I know for our initiative, we deal with all kinds of diversity, and have always been sensitive that we also talk about people with differing abilities. And I appreciate that very much. And I think that the sense of the Needham Diversity Initiative's resilience in this difficult time is even this innovative way to bring us on Zoom all together. Because I know dealing with the news and the tension and the turmoil we hear today is so difficult as we're isolated from each other physically. So to give us this opportunity to be in community and continue our work is a tremendous opportunity for the community. And I thank everyone who's made this possible.
Thank you, Denise. And one last thing, I realized I forgot to mention that the Needham Free Public Library is also a co-sponsor. So whoever put that into the chat, thank you for reminding me. I think we are ready for our speaker. I can't see everyone, but I think Anita, are you going to introduce?
I'm here.
Okay, I don't see you. Okay, great.
I just want to thank everyone again for coming. Again, it's a Sunday, but I can't think of any better reason than to get together. And I'm delighted to introduce our keynote speaker, Nikki Turpin. Nikki is a Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Chapel Hill Chauncey Hall in Waltham. She is going to talk about how we can think about evolving activism to be more impactful, why that's so important, and how history absolutely demands this of us. Nikki comes to us with a full plate. She is a woman who has a lot of balls in the air. She sits on multiple inclusivity and diversity boards throughout Massachusetts and also Hudson Swoop Clearwater. She is a passionate history of African American history. She recently presented at the Association of African American Museums, telling the full stories of African American female suffragists. She is also the programming director for the Robbins House, which is the home where the first freed African Americans lived in Concord, Massachusetts. And she does so much else. We would be here all day if I had to list it all down. But something fun about Nikki is that she is a self-described gaming geek. I hope I did justice to that. She loves playing Gorogoa. Never heard of that, but I trust that it's fun. She is a big escape room junkie. She loves playing Assassin's Creed, and she's a big Disney fan. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the indefatigable Nikki Turpin. And Nikki, you'll have to turn your mic on.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes, we can.
I'm still getting used to doing that. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am really honored to have been asked by David and the Needham Diversity Institute to speak today. David was one of probably the best cheerleaders I ever could have had. So, I miss him and our conversations so dearly. So today I want to have a conversation with all of you. And this is not a political conversation because the conversation topic is racism, and racism in America specifically, and how it's rearing its ugly head in every facet, in every thread of American culture. And what has been confirmed in these last few days is what has been known by many of us. And what's confirmed by that map that we're seeing is that we have seen that bigotry and hate are still just as strong out there. And in fact, those ideologies have been allowed to almost thrive, and they have indeed grown. We can see where the work needs to be done, specifically in this one map. So a few weeks ago, last week rather, I was watching Eddie Glaude, and he stated the other night that we in America are not unique in our evils or our sins as a country, but we are singular when it comes to acknowledging them. And we have not having had the right conversations, and we are not talking, and COVID has completely forced us to disconnect in the many ways that actually acknowledge who we are as human beings and that we are in fact connected. I know many of us sitting right here right now are completely aware of the historic rage that fills this country. The countless moments where BIPOC people, LGBTIA plus community people have simply wanted to just live their lives and only to be met with fire and hate and death. 99 years ago, the town of Greenwood in Tulsa, known as Black Wall Street, was burned down to hatred. The National Guard was called in, airstrikes occurred, and by noon on June 1st, 35 city blocks were gone, and dozens of Black-owned businesses, hundreds of homes, 10,000 residents were homeless. Roughly $75 million in property, as we want to talk about money, were gone. Years of Black wealth, hard work, love, prosperity, all gone. And 300 victims were placed in an unmarked grave, and one that was yet to be found. So a community destroyed. That is America. In 1969, the LGBTIA community fought for their right to live freely. Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Riviera protested in Greenwich Village in New York, which I'm a New Yorker, so I know how that feels. After police raided on their community, taking to the streets nightly, and they just wanted to be heard and they wanted to be seen as human. Standing and protesting just to be able to say, I matter. In this space, I matter. In my home, I matter. And to be able to hang out with like-minded people without feeling like they have a fear of being arrested. So that too is America. Over the last 4 years, we've watched and sat by as we've seen injustice after injustice. And what have we done? Our complacency or our unwillingness or our inability to get uncomfortable, dirty, hurt, or worse has led us to be where we are or were 4 years ago. And what history has taught us is that in this moment, if we do not push this movement, if we do not push past these lawn signs and t-shirts, we are likely going to self-destruct. In essence, this election should not have been this divided when we all watch children separated from parents. And I'm not addressing the conversations of how people come to this country, because ripping children away from parents is not a new act for this country. It happened daily at the auctions that sold my ancestors. It happened to Native children who were separated from their homes, their parents, their tribes, shipped off to boarding schools in Concord, having their tongues cut for speaking their native language, beautiful locks of hair cut so they can become assimilated. This moment shouldn't have been so divided after almost 230,000 people have lost their lives, and that number is growing consistently every day, from a virus that was completely preventable in so many ways. If science had just been believed, if committees had stayed intact and not been dismantled, if people actually just cared enough to simply wash their hands and wear a mask no matter what, because it meant it could save another human being's life. 4 years ago, we heard white supremacists chant, "We will not be replaced." And it was hateful and it was shameful, but also sad. And how sad must your existence be to fear being replaced, and yet to believe that you're replaceable, and the only way you can choose to fight against that is with more hate. that your existence is no longer a legacy that's of love and kindness and empathy, but one of hate and fear and violence. What we're asking for is for people to evolve. And we use that term of progressive and conservative, and it's very American to make these things really pretty, so much so that we kind of forget to dig deep on them. But what does conservative actually mean? What does progressive actually mean? They're arbitrary in so many ways. What we're fighting for is for people to know that this country is built on an idea that it is for people, for all of us. For many of us, we've spent 13 years reciting a pledge ending with liberty and justice for all of us. So how can anyone wonder why people are fighting to ensure that those words aren't just words, that we actually hold them accountable and that we stand up and do that? Everyone is allowed to believe whatever they want, to pray to whatever God you want, but your life and your beliefs should not affect the safety and livelihood of all of the others around you. And America is for all of us. We need to no longer hide the truth of how this nation was built. It was built like everything else that is glorified, like the pyramids across the oceans. It was built on slave labor. And all of our stories are included in this fabric that make this country's history and make this country's culture. And knowing them makes us that much better and stronger. To sit and listen to a sitting president say to not teach the truth of the country should question us all as to why one would not want everyone to know the truth. So when we discuss empathy, when we discuss caring, I want you to imagine being me or being anyone from a marginalized group and seeing the visuals and numbers display throughout a whole week, every night, that confirm an almost unrelenting truth that you've known your entire life. The problem is not singular. The problem is not a difference of opinion. The problem is not political. The problem is that you cannot teach empathy to a group of people that do not feel that anyone who doesn't look, live, or think like them has a right to happiness. When someone's 401k means more to them than stopping a virus from spreading and killing others, can that person demonstrate empathy? This election may have certified in the near future that we could feel safe, but in some ways it doesn't matter, because the work to be done will be longer than the next 4 years and maybe even longer than the next 10 years. What we've learned from these last 4 years will be important in how we continue to grow as a society and as a community and as humans. What we will still fighting for is the right to be full citizens in a country that from the beginning labeled many of us as not human, as wrong, as illegal, by people living on land that was stolen from its original caretakers. When Obama was elected and re-elected, change and hope were more alive than probably ever before. And we saw progress in what we thought everyone wanted, which was to care for not everyone, even though it wasn't perfect. But then the meaning of change kind of shifted, and it became overwhelming to watch friends and family and loved ones latch onto this mantra of hate and ignorance. Connections were completely broken. True dreams were lost and replaced by this nightmare, waking up every day asking, is this really in fact where I am, or is this merely just a bad dream? And this nightmare is much more of a reality than it ever was before. It's not over, because the idea that America is for everyone is becoming less and less of a foundational belief and is being replaced by the belief that America is solely for those who look or act the way they believe is American. So how do you fight that? We fight with love. And what do you love? Ask yourself, what do I love? Now go get close to that. Love and proximity equals a power only you can engage in, power that will help. Dr. King once said that the threat we face is not at the hands of our enemies, but at the silence of our friends. Friends are the ones that support you, the family you've chosen versus the one you're born into. And at times they drive us completely crazy, and at others, they inspire us to help. But when they don't defend us, when they let us down by not supporting us, we're all devastated. That betrayal cuts deeper than any others. And 2020 fully opened that Pandora's box. We do not let it close without fixing the problems it revealed. Again, this is not a political conversation. I love this country, and love is not easy. Almost 15 years of marriage and a 10-year-old daughter has taught me that. Love is such an easy word to say, just one syllable, but the action itself is hard and it's completely exhausting. It's not something you can just do or let happen, because love changes you and you have to be involved with love and for it to be active and work. You have to work and adapt and maintain your love. Otherwise, it dies or worse. It can turn on you and become ugly or violent. And you cannot become complacent in love. But love does not make me blind into the forms of inequality that remain, in many ways, America. And America knows it's not always liberty and justice for all, because if it truly believed that sentiment, liberty and justice for all, we would not have multiple civil rights acts spanning from 1866 to 1968. If we truly believed, we would not have sat silently in 1985 while police dropped combat explosives in Philadelphia, let alone not acknowledge that this week a vote had to be taken on whether or not to even apologize for killing 11 people, 5 being children. A vote had to be voted on to acknowledge wrongdoing for leaving 250 people homeless. I want all of us to be our best possible versions of ourselves. And empathy and compassion and love belong to all of us. It's all well past time for us to start showing that to each other. So I'm here, sitting, standing, telling you it's time for you to work. It is time for your generosity, your hospitality, your compassion, and most of all, your love to act. It's going to challenge you. It's going to make you question yourself, your surroundings, and so much more. That is going to get uncomfortable. So get uncomfortable with being comfortable, uncomfortable. Same thing, working through it. But here's my warning. When it's uncomfortable, you will not want to see what others see of you. And sometimes you may not like what you find of yourself, and that's okay. Don't let race or gender or ability or sexuality or income disparity or any other factor distract you from doing your work. Be willing to get into that ickiness, because that means you're growing. That means you're becoming powerful. And whenever things break, something is released. When you grow, it's never easy. You're going to make mistakes. Accept that. But keep helping. You are allowed to make mistakes because it's human and it's expected. Just being there and being in those moments speaks for itself. Put yourself out there, because what we are replacing is this notion that anyone here is supreme. Our differences make us special. Our success does not take away from anyone else. It only serves to make us all stronger and more aware and truly empathetic in a way that has lasting effects. But in order to be really successful and happy, in order to own that, I need you all to care if there are inequities. You have to stop them. And some of us might gain some success. Care about what is at stake for so many people in this country. I have so much faith in everyone that's here and a lot of people that are out there, and the ability to change this country and make it one where everyone can thrive. One where people can love whomever they want to love loudly, where everyone truly has the chance to be a full citizen in a country that is happy to help them be successful. So how do you do this? How do you help? Go identify the oppressed, your marginalized people, your marginalized groups, and consider how you can use your abilities, money, time, connections, talents, any of those as service. Because service allows you to connect and give power to others that need that stepping stone. The time for fear and anger, it's kind of over, because we need to stop being outraged and complacent in our actions. You got to go do something. Why, you're asking? Probably like, why should I do this? Because you have the ability to do it. You are capable. Use it. Volunteer somewhere, especially a place where you don't feel comfortable. If anyone can, it's all of you. Bring all of your love and your compassion to those who can help, or you can help. Show compassion for those who are suffering and are oppressed. Yeah, go to a rally. Rallies are really cool. I love making signs, but show those who that you are determined to actually continue that conversation and continue to push forward their ability to be full citizens in this country. We have to unify, and we have to outnumber the hate. Putting a sign on your lawn or changing your social media profile picture one day doesn't help if for the other 364, you're absolutely doing nothing. Give time to the things and those who have been felt rejection and have felt loss. because your proximity is essential to helping them feel equal. Get closer to people who suffer from injustice the most. Brian Stevens once said, proximity equals power. Touch it and become part of it. Because being an ally is different than simply wanting to not be racist or sexist or homophobic. I think everyone understands that. Being an ally requires you to educate yourself about systemic oppression, racism, sexism, homophobia, and other inequities in this country, but more importantly, it requires you to act. And the world outside can be dangerous, and not just because of those who do harm and evil, but because there are more people who look on and do nothing. We may never be able to change some of those views, but also we can do the work and we don't have to accept it. These past 4 years have completely tested our ability to love, and it's been tumultuous to say probably the least and smallest. But I'm asking you to donate yourself. Your presence, your impact can change absolutely everything. A few years ago, because I'm a total nerd, as you heard, I watched a wildlife show that discussed the impact of 2 wolves that were released into Yellowstone Park. This is me putting on my teacher hat, my science teacher hat, in fact. And we know that the wolf is this creature feared by man, right? And often it's portrayed as a villain. But I learned that despite its bad reputation, the wolf is a magnificent creature. And we humans share a lot of commonalities with it. For example, our fingerprints, a wolf's howl is an identifier unique to each one of them. The program spoke of this trophic cascade, and this term refers to the different levels of the food chain. And plants are on one level, insects on the next, all the way down. However, the cascade now makes us look at the traditional food chain from a very different perspective. So think of like a small stream flowing through the woods and it comes to a waterfall or a cascade. As the stream falls over the edge of that cascade, it hits a rock and it splits. Then each of those waterfalls hit another rock and splinters again. So you end up with a single stream at the top, scattering in all of these different cascades. So a large carnivore, like my friend the wolf, is at the top of the food chain, and its effects on the rest of the systems completely splinter out once he's placed back in this beautiful ecosystem. He's chasing, he's hunting, and competing with other species that have helped restore balance into this place. So since these wolves have returned to Yellowstone, the elk and the deer are actually stronger. The aspens and the willows are healthier, and the grasses are actually taller. And when the wolves chase the elk during the hunt, the elk has forced to run faster and farther. And so that has aerated the soil, which has allowed more grass to grow. Coyote populations were nearly out of control in Yellowstone Park before these wolves returned. And now the coyotes have been outcompeted and essentially reduced by 80% in their area. So the coyotes that do remain are more skittish and kind of worried to actually step out. And with fewer coyotes hunting small rodents, raptors like the eagle, they have more prey and they're making a comeback, they're growing. So by adding the wolves into the climate, the whole system benefited. We need to be the wolves. We need to place ourselves back into the chain at the top to restore order and rebalance the ecosystem that is our country. We need to restore everyone's ability to thrive, even if they have no idea it's helping them. I've heard a few stories about this guy, and he's from Nazareth or somewhere like that. And apparently he had a pretty chill mom, pretty cool dad. This guy simply really loved to help people. His whole thing was helping people. And despite others' judgments of him, he continued to help to his dying day. What I've taken from those stories about him is that our effect on society doesn't have to be a world impacting moment. It just needs to impact our small part of the world. And from there, it's gonna spread. I'm the daughter of 2 African-American parents. My mom is in her late 60s and my dad just turned 79. And they were both raised in Selma, Alabama, in a time where being who they were could easily get them hurt or killed or attacked. So they were not really overflowing with joy, as I tell you this story, when I married a very white male from Massachusetts. They were scared, and their fear came from a real place. It wasn't intolerance. The fear that they had was about me and whether I was placing myself in a place where I would be a token person of color. And would I be safe? And would this person stand up for me if something happened? For a while, nothing seemed like it would ever get fixed. And we lived through these really awkward moments and situations until the NBA playoffs. I had just had my daughter, and my mom came down to visit because I had to go to work. And my husband and my mom came downstairs after a really long day, were screaming at the TV during the NBA playoffs. They found something that they loved that wasn't me or even my daughter, it was basketball. And now the fact that they both love me and my daughter Ella, that's enough with basketball. They were able to start having real conversations. And what my mother needed was that connection. She now, many, many years later, will text my husband before she texts me when she wants to talk about anything ridiculous, basketball, or even the death of George Floyd. She was able to learn that she could safely trust him to unpack her feelings and feel in that moment with someone who didn't look just like her, but it was someone who knew who she was and she had a connection to. They're friends. And so much so that every time that we are together, they have deep conversations about the world and what they're experiencing from their two different points of view. And yet there's no fighting, there's no bickering, there's no more fear because this is safe. They are safe together. They knew and they now understand each other's fears. And they also know that they share love. And from that moment, there was power in their proximity. And this is how we reclaim our shared humanity. Every human you interact with or play a part in their trophic cascade. This is more than just paying it forward. And we have to work. We got to make sure that we're ensuring that the coyotes that remain are a little too afraid to disturb the balance that we're bringing back. The coyotes will never change their ways, and that might be okay. They might never change their minds, and that's going to have to be okay. But we have to make sure that chaos is not our world. The chaos that they would like to bring is not the world we are in. I leave you this afternoon with two quotes, one from Pope Francis' mission statement. More than by fear of going astray, by hope, my hope is that we will be moved by the fear of remaining shut up within structures which give us a false sense of security, within rules which make us harsh judges, within habits which make us feel safe, while at other door, people are starving, and Jesus not tired of saying to us, give them something to eat. So I ask you to be giving of oneself. So you might be sitting there saying, okay, Nikki, but what are you doing? For me, it's helping to push people like you, people not like you, into these uncomfortable conversations and moments where they can have factual history in order to make sure that they are having a real understanding of the knowledge and understanding of what nation they are in. My dream is to see education actually educate and have all stories and points of view heard. There's no right or wrong, there's only the truth. And this isn't my story, it's our story. It's the nation's story, and it's full of deceit and murder and love and revenge and power and villains, and most importantly, heroes. And sometimes they're a little gray and messy, and that's okay. I want my legacy to be one that inspires others to learn from me and learn from others and connect to all people in the world. And our differences are small in comparison to some of the really big things that we have in common and the love we can give to each other and share. So lastly, I quote from my friend Ryan Clavin. Ryan and I are both pop culture lovers. Shows like Buffy and Angel really resonated with us in some real ways because those shows had a hero, a support crew, and a villain. Excuse me. So when we were discussing the support and his support specifically of the BLM movement and other groups of social activism, I wanted to thank him because he used his platform in a way that many white males would not. And Ryan responded to me saying, I know I'm just a theme park person, but if I could help at least one person by speaking up, I think it's worth it. I haven't watched Power Rangers for 27 years to keep my mouth shut when there's a monster around. And I couldn't agree any more with him. So power up and slay the monster. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Can everyone hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Great. That was a really amazing speech. So Nikki brings a lot. One of the reasons why we had Nikki to speak is that, part of what she brings is this very deep understanding of history. And we've had a discussion about that several times of how history really impacts our actions today. And the lack of understanding of our common history impacts our actions or inactions today. And I'd like to dive back into that a little bit before answering some of the questions I see here in chat. But one of the things you were mentioning in an earlier conversation was, for example, during all the turmoil that we've seen this summer, there was a lot of people that spoke up and said, well, why can't our protesters today protest like King and Gandhi did back in the days? You know, they were peaceful protesters. They didn't burn and loot, and they didn't destroy. They were completely peaceful. And we talked about placing that into historical context. And, you know, we were talking about how radical that concept was back then. Do you want to elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. So it's often always said, right, that, oh, Dr. King was so peaceful. But if you go back to that time frame, if you read newspaper clippings from that time frame, people were out of their mind about what he was doing. They thought it was over the top and super dramatic, and asked him to find any specific other way than the way he was doing it to protest. And I also always go back to the fact that he did this peaceful act and he was still killed. So what does that say, right? You know, we will be looked at 20, maybe 30 years from now at how we didn't listen to Colin Kaepernick silently kneel, a very silent, small act. And then we progress to more and more acts. And then suddenly riots happening, and rioting because it's as King said, it's the voice of the unheard. If you are not listening to me when I'm speaking to you in my gentle tone, then I must get louder, right? And so history has shown us that people will rework this, like, look how great it was once some progress has happened, right? But in fact, in his time, people were sending Dr. King death threats pretty daily. We look at Medgar Evers. He was shot and killed in front of his home, and he was doing the most peaceful thing, which was just trying to sign people up to be able to vote. So I always question, when you think about Dr. King, you're thinking about it from the place that we have all been taught, which is he was great and made change happen. But in that time period, people did not love and embrace him the way we do.
We have a question here from Eric Kent Benedict. He said, Nikki, this is so inspiring and memorable. I have a question. In many of our towns, most public action, even supportive ones, are in white spaces. And white people going to non-white spaces can feel like intrusion. Do you have any thoughts about the first steps white people who want to meaningfully support Black, Indigenous persons of color might take given those constraints?
Go to spaces and be there. That's it. Because this is a fight that is not going to be won, obviously, by just the minority groups fighting for it, because that term automatically states that there are not enough of us to make change. It has to be our white friends. It has to be our white brothers and sisters who come up and stand up. And so that means just go to those spaces. Ask, how can I help? What can I do? You know, engage in community affairs where you know that you have other like-minded people that can make change happen. Like there's Surge in Boston, and that's a white group that's helping to have activism and show people how to be activists. Needham Diversity Institute, there's always these conversations that you guys are putting out to like really get people engaged in the topic. So share that out, bring people in, gain numbers, right? Just put yourself there. Everyone wants you there. That's the other thing. I think a lot of people are like, oh, people don't want me to be there because I'm white. But actually, no, come. I want you to learn about my culture. I want you to learn about my oppression. I want you to help me. And the only way you can do that is if we become friends. So come on in, right? Come hang out.
Another question that I wanted to ask you too is we talked a little bit about white people having a tremendous amount of power. And we talked a little bit about how you think that it's pushed upon us that we shouldn't be using or exercising this power of influence. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Because I'm curious myself.
Yeah, so I know that a lot of people push back on this idea of white privilege, right? People hear that and suddenly they shut down. I am not from a space of privilege. What do you mean? But in fact, you have so much power. It's not a negative. It is a moment where you can say, I'm going to start questioning the people at the table that I'm sitting at about why there are not other people who do not look like us or think like us or bodied like us in this space, who not identified like we do. So there's this idea of, for me anyway, of allowing and telling people it's okay to know your privilege exists, but it's how you're using it in order to make things better. And that could be simply at work. That could simply be at the gym that you go to. I know I was a real big fan of a boutique workout, and I started to notice that there were no brown women using it. And I'm like, so why is that happening? Why are there not more? And so I kept questioning that, right? And there eventually were people saying, oh yeah, that's really weird. So it's just giving that small question of how do we bring in other people so that they can feel like they're a part of this as well, that will start actually getting change to happen and it organically happen.
How do we get these instances of history? How do we get people to hear about it? You know, I was in PR last weekend, and I was listening to an interview that the moderator had with Ruby Bridges, who's coming out with her new book about her experience integrating into a New Orleans school. And of course, I think many of us have heard of or read, have studied or been educated on the story of integration and Ruby Bridges in grade school, middle school, whatnot. We never learn the details. I was absolutely flabbergasted to learn, and the interviewer Ruby was as well, to learn that not only did she have to go through the gauntlet of hate to actually walk into the school and be escorted, of course, by the National Guard, but she was the only kid in the school that day. She actually was taught in the classroom by herself, because 500 children who went to that school got up and left, and very few came back that day. How do we know, how do we hear about this type of history? And the other thing too that I was struck by is that no teacher would teach her from New Orleans. They had to bring a teacher from Boston to come and teach Ruby.
Yeah, and that's Ruby's story. And it's I've heard Ruby speak, and it's real. And you know, this weekend was the anniversary of her integrating into schools. It is a very different story when you hear the fact that there is someone every day, there were groups of people every day outside of this little girl's school holding a baby casket with a doll that looked like her. And that's what she walked by every day of her education, 180 days, right? We don't talk about that. We don't talk about the ugly that this child had to go through and how that changed her. So I'm always challenging people, what part of the history book isn't there? What part of the English, who's in your English curriculum that could be taken out and a new voice put in? And I really strongly believe that it starts with our schools. It starts with us as parents and what we bring into our kids' lives, right? Do you only pick books that show a child that looks like them, or do you show a window into someone else's world? Ruby's daily experience of having to go through that, and also to hear, so there was like 5 kids that were next door that she could hear learning with another teacher. So that also there's that psychological break of, she's by herself with a person who has to be shipped in and bussed in to teach her, right? And so why don't we talk about those parts of the story? Why do we glorify it just like we glorify that everyone loves Dr. King, right? We don't talk about the ugly with Dr. King. We only talk about how there was a change or movement happening. So it really starts with addressing your schools and really asking them to put into the curriculum the full story, the full picture. You know, if it's a little tiny picture inside that history book, so then as a teacher, you should teach only that tiny picture in the history book, not the big pictures, because that's the part that kids need, because that's the gap that you're not going to be able to fill with that book.
Do you have books that you recommend for people just trying to learn a little bit more about language, about beginning to be active, history?
Yeah.
Let us know. We'll put it into the chat.
I love Stamped from the Beginning. I think it's super dense and there's so much information. It can get super overwhelming when you're reading it, but it's so worth the ride because it really does. It explains all those little boxes that are not in your history book or your English book. I'm also a huge fan of Isabel Wilkerson. And so her book Caste is a great way to look at how our economic and slavery are very similar to the one in India, as well as her Warmth of Other Suns book, which talks about the migration. And I always find it best to find stories that elevate history. And I know that sounds crazy, but I want to know the historical facts. I want to know what actually happened. And so those are the 3 books. I think if you start there, those are your new textbooks, right? Like this is your like history 101 non-whitewashed. Here it is. Learn about the things that really actually impacted the country you live in that you didn't know of. You know, I believe there was a study that was done recently by the Sovereign Poverty Line, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where most students who graduated 5 years ago did not realize that slavery was actually the reason for the Civil War. They thought it was only money. So that conversation that money was actually a human being's body was never clarified enough for them to be able to say it was slavery. So we have a lot of work to do, and we have to start by ourselves and then spreading it to the children who are going to take over this country for us one day. And, you know, when we're in our like old rockers, when we're old, that they're going to make it totally fine. We're all going to be happy. But the only way is to get them to know the real truth of everything that's happening around them.
So we have a question from John Carr, and I'm going to sort of paraphrase this question. But his question is, how do we get more Black and brown peoples to come and live in Needham? And I would say towns like Needham. There are a lot of beautiful suburbs that exist all around Massachusetts. And this beauty is exclusive to persons of color. How do we bring them in? What kind of initiatives do we need to put in place? Any recommendations? The third part of the question is, any recommendations on what one person, say like a white male, can do? And I can break that down.
Yeah. I mean,
You're done.
Right? So is it a place that I would want to live? You know, and so that's the first question. You're asking for brown people to come, but is it a place I want to live? Will I be able to walk into Target and find a product for my hair? Or am I going to have to go to Amazon and ship that out? Am I going to be able to find the food that I traditionally eat from my culture, or am I going to have to find someplace else to go? So the first thing is making sure that your environment is one where people who are different, who are BIPOC, will feel like they can actually live there, right? And so that, as silly as it sounds about my hair, I have to drive to Worcester to get my hair done. And I live in Leominster, right? Because there's no place in Leominster that can do my hair this way. So it's those small little pieces of that. First, the person has to feel like they can, is to question what's stopping, right? Is it social economic? Is it awareness? How are homes being marketed? Where are they being marketed? Is someone pushing back on equal housing? So there was a couple of nights ago, there was on PBS, there was a short show. Well, it was a 30-minute show, but there was a short segment about equal housing and people wanting to support that. And they were actually in Texas, I believe. And the white woman says, well, I'm not racist. I really want people, but they don't have, you know, I'm not into single moms. I don't think they have the same morals or thoughts that I do. So if you're bringing brown people into your community or BIPOC people into your community, are they going to be met with people who will openly say, you don't have the same ideologies as I do because you're a single parent? Not even questioning, why are you a single parent? Could it have been a widow? Like, we have no idea, right? So these are all the questions that before we start bringing people in, we need to make sure that that space is actually safe and one that they can thrive in. So once you figure that out, then you need to start talking to your real estate agent. How are you bringing people in? Are you doing the most you possibly can? Talk to your banks. Are you doing absolutely everything you can to ensure that we can bring in people who are different? Are we causing different social economic or letting different social economic places come into our community? And are we okay with that we might need to support? Our taxes might go up, but this is for the greater good of our community. So those are all hard conversations that if you're ready to take on, go for it. I highly encourage you. But that's really where the change is going to happen, is really opening up to the fact that every neighborhood should have different social economic abilities within it for it to actually thrive.
Question from Amy Hurley. She said, Nikki, thank you. She said, I'm curious, did you leave the gym or stay?
Oh, I left.
Where did you go?
I ended up buying a Peloton. That way I know it's always diverse in my gym.
What would have happened if you had stayed though? What would you have done?
I think I would have been a lot louder. And, you know, I say that because I am loud and I push back and I ask hard questions to people and I stay until I get the answer that I feel like I'm okay with. I know that there were some changes being made, and I know a lot of, and I will say that I know a lot of boutique workout places are really starting to look at who their clientele is and also who their staff is. So I think that there's been a great change in that. You know, even with Peloton, they've really identified the fact that they want to promote women of color on their platforms. So I think that's absolutely phenomenal, but it can't be a one-off. It has to be consistently looking at how you hire, how you market yourself. Are you making everyone feel like they can come in and take a class, you know, or join, or even afford membership? Because that's the other thing about boutique, you know, workout classes, is that there's a level of social economics that plays, right? There's a level of monetary that some people can't make happen. So how do you market it so that everyone can feel included again?
Great. I guess the last question is a question from me. I'm just curious because you are the program director for the Robbins House in Concord. And until I spoke with you, I didn't realize that Concord was such a hotbed of abolition and anti-slavery activism. And it's, you know, I think I've been to Concord. I'd be curious how many people have been to Concord and didn't know this. And I still go back to that the same conundrum that I have is why don't we promote this? I mean, how can we get the city of Concord to celebrate this rich history? And we have I don't know if the audience knows, but, you know, we have notable figures like Harriet Tubman that has visited Concord and spoken there, Frederick Douglass, John Brown, you know, several abolitionist figures that we all know, the Alcotts, the Louisa May Alcott family, the Emersons and the Thoreaus. How is this history, what would you like to see this type of history celebrated within each of our own town? I know in Needham, I think there was a house that no longer exists, but it did exist at one point in the Green Book Guide. You know, why do we have to dig to get this information?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of what we're working on, right? Is that we have to start opening up and revealing the truths of location, right? In our proximity, like, where do we stand? When I walk into a space, or go somewhere new, I always look up who actually was here first. There's like a website, and I always say, what Native person was here first? Because it's not often just told to us. And it takes a little bit of digging, which it shouldn't, because it's just our history. It's our country's history. It's how we were formed. You know, I think about like how much information and how people love talking about Alexander Hamilton, right? And the play Hamilton made everyone start digging into history. And then people started hitting that wall where they realized, oh, Alexander Hamilton owned slaves via marriage. And so then they kind of want to close that back up and then only just celebrate the good things, right? But that's the thing. They are human beings and they are gray. They did some amazing things. And there's some messy parts of them as well, but that's called being a human. And that would allow us all to understand, I'm going to make some mistakes. I have to own those, and then I'm going to make it better. So I think that that's really where we are, is that we're still not very comfortable with saying or acknowledging kind of those ugly gray parts, but those ugly gray parts are normal. That's called growing. That's called, you know, being a human being. I think every town should do a BIPOC history for itself, through your library, through your schools. You know, I know in Concord, they have the Rivers and Revolutions group, and they do a lot of history about what actually happened in the town that people don't know about. So really, libraries and schools are the way to go to be able to find documentation of all these things. And then also just talking about it. So have a group gathering where you say, hey, let's look at this letter that's from someone, a person of color, talking about like, it could be as small as planting. Like a lot of things about farming are in New England. And so like, there's a lot of records of farming. So let's just read this and really discovering who lived on that land and then celebrating it, right? Finding out why and how you can like amplify their story and tell their legacy. I always find it crazy that we live in Boston-ish area and there's no Crispus Attucks Day. And he was the first person to die for the freedom of this country. Black male. We don't talk about that, right? We don't have a Crispus Attucks Day. We have a Patriots Day. We don't have a day for the man who was the first person shot for the revolution. So again, these are things we can do. We can make those happen, but we just have to kind of push it through and really talk about it and engage our like local political offices, our, you know, politicians, and say, hey, we want to do this. We want to put this on the books. We want to talk about it and make it part of our narrative all the time.
Thank you. I go back to what you said, which is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And conversations like this can be very uncomfortable for many of us on both sides of the aisle. I have a question from Joe Adu. He said, if there's time, and there's time, I think this will be our last question. He says, a Black Needham resident, one of the challenges that I face when discussing issues of race is the issue of denialism. Many folks just don't think we have these issues here in Needham, and that makes it difficult for me to even engage sometimes. How do we continue having these conversations in our local communities when so many still don't think these issues are relevant to Needham?
That's a good one.
Or to any, I guess, any community.
Yeah. So I think that it's consistently talking about it. It's still engaging in the conversation and not letting their inability to know your truth change how you discuss your narrative. I find a lot of times when people don't believe something is happening, it's more of a reflection of their own vision, like their own vision of who or what they're seeing. And so sometimes that's hard, right? Like right now we're looking at a good chunk of a generation who has now kind of come to terms with the fact that I am white, I'm in this body, and maybe the things that I have gotten or have nothing to do with the fact that I'm amazing and have everything to do with my skin color. So who am I now? How do I interact with the world knowing that my advancing in life had maybe only a small amount to do with my actual ability and probably a lot more to do with my skin color, right? So we're also fighting that self-awareness, for lack of a better word. I would say do not stop talking about the incidents because people need to continuously hear, because in hopes of continuously hearing, they will try to change and help change happen and then start speaking up. So the more people that come out and talk about it, the better off your community is going to be.
One last question, then we'll wrap up. And this is from Tincia Solari. What advice do you have for public school teachers who might be afraid of parent reactions if they teach difficult topics like LGBTQ history, issues, or anything about racism?
Yeah, so I'll give a little bit of story. This probably will take up the whole time. I'm sorry. So I'm going to answer this question in a roundabout way. So before I was at Chapel of Chauncey Hall, I was at a school that did not talk about racism in the way it should have. Kids were ready. Teachers were ready. Parents were not ready. Heads of the school were not ready. They were not engaging in the conversation. That is where your real ally is your head of your school, your principal. And if you can prepare your principals to feel like they can handle that conversation, you are completely gold, as I like to say. If a principal or superintendent doesn't feel like they can handle those conversations of pushback, they're going to push back onto you. So I always say, invite or find PDs that you can say, hey, Superintendent K, come with me and can we do this PD together? So that they can start feeling comfortable about these conversations. At the end of the day, though, you have to do what's right by the student. And what's right by the student is educating them with a full picture of what that topic is. And if parents push back, the other option is to actually offer a parent class. And I have found that to be really helpful, is to say, hey, we're going to start talking about this next week with your class. Let's have a small, when we could get together, I'd bring people into the classroom. But now you could probably do it with Zoom, which actually might be even more effective. And just give the parents a one-on-one class about what you're about to teach and get them comfortable with the terminology, get them comfortable hearing about it. Because then when their kids come home, they can feel comfortable engaging in those conversations. I know as a parent, I hate looking at a math problem and being like, wait, what is that? Like, I feel so unprepared, right? Like, I'm smart. Why can't I do this? Right? So it's never a bad idea to also bring in your parents and say, hey, I'm going to teach this. Let's all work together, parent, teacher, together to make sure that our students know what they need to know.
Great. Nikki, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
We love spending the time with you. Thank you to everyone in the community, and thanks to all the questions that did come through. I guess we will turn this back over to Gretchen and Rebecca Drill now, and you can take the spotlight off Nikki and I. And again, thanks to everybody.
We can't hear you, Rebecca.
You would think after all these months of using Zoom, we would know to unmute ourselves. And Gretchen, you're still muted too.
Oh, I was just letting you talk.
I saw you laughing. I was just saying how powerful Nikki's talk was and the conversation with Nikki and Anita and all the questions that came in. So I just wanted to really thank you both.
And thank you, Nikki. I'll be very brief. Thank you, Nikki. Your words were powerful. I had several amen moments. So thank you very much. And I just wanted to say personally, I'm extremely proud of you. And I know that David Summergrad would be too. So thank you.
So if I have this right, I think we are scheduled for a break right now.
Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce you to this particular special guest today. And I have both the honor and privilege and joy of talking with him today. But first I want to share a little bit about his story. I want to give a little bit of background, and then we're going to dive into what I know will be a wonderful conversation with Marvin Henry, who I now call my friend. On Friday, February 29th, I received an unexpected call from a close friend, Michelle Chalmers. And Michelle is with us today. And she's the former president of World of Wellesley, as a matter of fact, and I'm sure many of you know her. So I received an unexpected call from Michelle late at night, late on a Friday night after 11 p.m. Getting calls from Michelle was not that unusual because we talk often, but seeing an incoming call from her so late at night worried me. When we connected, she emotionally explained that she needed to talk to me about something that happened in Needham. It seemed so important that we agreed she should drive over to my house to talk about it. We stayed up late into the night talking about today's guest, about an incident involving a Black massage therapist at a Needham spa who she'd had an appointment with that day, who nervously shared a deeply compelling and troubling story with her. Many of us in Needham have come to know that story. Marvin Henry explained to her that he was still feeling uneasy and nervous about what might eventually happen to him following an incident in Needham that took place on January 25th. Marvin explained that he'd been surrounded by a number of Needham police and detained in handcuffs on a public sidewalk for a lengthy period that day, and eventually learned that he was under suspicion of serial shoplifting. And that was after purchasing a few items at the CVS near the Starbucks. Though eventually released, he was weeks later left with concerns about an eventual hearing, the need for expensive legal representation, and possible impact on his job at the spa that could imperil his ability to make a living for his family. After considering Marvin's story, Michelle and I knew somehow we needed to assist him in some way. We were heartbroken for him, but knew that just being heartbroken wasn't enough. To make a long story short, we reached out to folks in the community to share his story, which ultimately led to assistance and advocacy by a number of Needham residents and town leaders, and pro bono legal assistance that has ultimately resulted in an investigation into the Needham Police Department's actions that day, as well as Marv's actions or non-actions, right? I'm thrilled to report that Marvin's name has been cleared 9 months after the initial incident, an outcome that appeared on the cover of the Needham Times on October 29th. Marvin Henry has been gracious enough to join us today so we can all get to know this wonderful man better, who I've had the pleasure of getting to know. To hear how what I personally believe, and this is a personal opinion, what I personally believe was a case of racially based mistaken identity that has affected his life, and to understand what he believes should be all of our takeaways from what happened to him. This is certainly an example of how one man, Marvin Henry, stood up for himself. And when we think about our theme of beyond the yard signs, I'd suggest this is also an example of what happens when we step forward to uplift others who may be struggling to be heard or supported, and using our voices, our privilege, and our actions to do so. So Marvin, I want to welcome you today.
Hey, Gretchen,
Yes.
we don't see Marvin as a participant. And
Oh,
I'm
he's
trying to
there.
spotlight him, and
He's there, but he's not under his name.
okay, can
So
you?
sorry. Let's
shoot
see.
a-
Let me.
Ingrid Duncan. I'm
There
under
he is.
Ingrid Duncan.
He's under Ingrid. Do you?
Wonderful, thank
sorry.
you. Thank you so much, sorry about that.
No, thank you,
That's
Allie,
okay.
for making sure that we had him spotlighted. So Marv, welcome.
Hi. How you guys doing?
There he is. It's so wonderful to see you. So I know that you and I have kind of, talked through what we'll chat about today a little bit. But I know that everybody would really love to hear directly from you.
Done with the pretzels?
Oh, Cynthia, can you mute yourself? Thank you so much. Thank you, Cynthia. And I know that, when we see newspaper articles that might talk about, an incident involving someone, it really doesn't tell us anything about the person, the human being behind the story. And so that's another one of the reasons why I'm really happy, Marv, to have you here today. And I'll be calling him Marv, and that's because he asked me to a few weeks ago. He said, I think at this point you and I are friends. And so my friends call me Marv. And so I really do see that as so much of an honor. Thank you. So Marv, would you mind telling me, tell us a bit about yourself, things that we wouldn't know from headlines, right? That we've seen in recent months. Where are you from? How would you describe yourself as a person? What kind of work do you do? And what kinds of things do you enjoy?
Well, I'm from Jamaica. I'm a guy that thinks I'm pretty fair and kind. I really love helping others, and I enjoy working with my hands.
Wonderful. Thank you. I know. I remember you told me something like, I like fixing things and I like fixing people with my hands, right? Which
Yep.
speaks to you being a massage therapist. I love that. You've talked with me a great deal about your 4 sons.
Yep.
What do you value most about fatherhood? I expect you've also taught your sons countless things. And, so not only what do you value about fatherhood, but what do you think your sons have taught you?
Well, I love having my boys. I love their love. They give me a lot of love, and I appreciate their love. And that makes me feel loved inside a lot. And watching them sleep is one of my greatest accomplishments. I can just get that warm feeling that every parent feels when they have to tuck them in and just watch them be at peace, And the one thing I can say that they definitely teach me, because they are a handful all the time, is patience.
I hear you on that one, Mark. I've got 3 kids myself, as you and I have discussed, right? And I have twin boys who are 19. Do you know I still watch them sleep at night? And I still get pleasure from that. So I don't think that's ever going to go away, Marv. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to shift a little, if you don't mind, to the incident that many folks in our community and beyond have heard about, that took place on January 25th of this year in Needham. What impression did that incident leave with you in the hours and days that immediately followed?
Well, that incident caused me to feel like less of a person. It made me feel like less of a working father, and it really put me in a dark place for a while.
Yeah, I remember when you and I first talked. I believe it might have been early March, and I could feel that from you. I really could. And I think that even more at that point, when Michelle and I continued to talk about this situation, we knew that we just wanted to do something, because we could hear that coming from you.
I really, really appreciate all your help, guys.
Well, let me tell you, it was our honor. It was our honor, Marvin. So were you concerned, when you think about it, were you concerned about continuing to work in Needham after the incident?
Well, it kind of left me with a lot of anxiety, It made going to work for me sometimes very, very troubling. It makes me wonder if this is going to be the day that I actually lose my life just for walking down the wrong side of the street.
Thank you. And then how about the CVS? Like when you think about a store that, you told us that you frequented often.
Yeah, I still haven't gone back to that place out of fear. I've just never walked back into that store. I don't know what their next accusation is going to be, so I just stayed away from it.
Do you envision a time when you'll ever feel comfortable returning to that store?
No, they have lost my business forever.
Understood. Is there anything you'd ask of bystanders to consider during similar incidents? So if someone is witnessing, an incident like yours and how you were detained on the, out on the street in front of the Starbucks, is there anything that you would ask bystanders to consider when they witness something like that?
Well, I would have hoped more bystanders would look at me with empathy instead of with judgment. It was like I saw a lot of like how you say the body how you say the posture of people when they were looking at me was like they were more standoffish, like, oh my God, another criminal. Like, instead of like, oh, this is another person, like, what's really going on. And I noticed no one really took their phone out to record what was going on, to kind of hold the police accountable for their actions. So it's like in the future, we as citizens should be policing the police, because that's what we pay them for. So if someone had took their phone out to kind of record the situation, I believe that would cause the police to be more conscious of the way they were treating.
Yeah, because I think you mentioned can you just remind us how long it was when you were asking why they had detained you, and how long did it take for you to understand why you were being detained?
About 35 to almost 40 minutes.
Though you'd been asking, I think you had mentioned that you had been asking multiple times, but you just hadn't received it. And how did it make you feel? I remember you mentioned to me as well that there was a gentleman who walked by, I believe, with a little boy, and can you talk to us a little bit about what did he do when he walked by with the little boy, and how did that, what feeling did that leave you with?
Well, he was coming out of Starbucks with his grandson, and he just tried to cover his face, like, he didn't want him to see what was really going on. And that really hit hard for me, where I'm just like, wow, like, that really shows me that the empathy is pretty much came out of it. I'm at that moment considered a criminal versus a person that's just being harassed.
Okay, or yeah, like being detained. But clearly when someone's being detained, that doesn't necessarily mean they're guilty of what they've been detained for. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in your instance. Yeah.
Yeah. You're innocent until proven guilty. I think that's the law.
Thank you, Marv. Now that you've been cleared, publicly of any kind of wrongdoing in this situation, and so much more has come out about it, how do you feel about Needham as a community now?
Well, I still think Needham is a wonderful town. I love working in the town of Needham. The clients that I've had in Needham are all wonderful people. So many of them reached out to me and showed me so much empathy. Every time they come in, they let me know how sorry they are the situation happened to me. It started with Miss Michelle, and I'll forever be grateful to her. It's been wonderful. People have really let me feel their love.
Well, that's wonderful. I think this is it's an example of how we can rise up as human beings to support one another. How does it leave you feeling about the Needham Police Department?
Well, I'm kind of grateful that they recanted their statement eventually, after my lawyers had to be on them repeatedly for them to do so. But, I would love to see some changes happen in the department.
Do you have any thoughts on what kind of changes you feel might maybe eventually make it better?
Well, for them to treat everyone equally, in a sense. I don't think they would have treated their friend or their cousin or their brother the way they treated me.
Thank you, Marvin. My last question, or last couple of questions for you. What do you hope your sons will take away from all of this when they're old enough to better understand how you stood up for yourself in this situation? What do you hope they'll take away from it?
Just being strong and standing up for yourself is always the best action to take.
Clear cut. Thank you, Marv. And is there anything else you would like to share with the Needham community as you're putting this, trying to, kind of put this experience behind you? Though we expect, it will never be forgotten. But is there anything that, anything else you would like to share with the Needham community?
Yes, I would like for us to not wait until there's a natural disaster in order for us to start treating everyone equal and start treating everyone with love. It seems like only when everyone's life is on the line, or there's a hurricane or earthquake or a car accident, that we forget the color of our skin and remember that humanity is the thing that really matters.
Marv, that's powerful. I'm taking that away. I am taking that away. Thank you. Thank you so much. And, it's interesting, I'd like to also leave our friends and neighbors with just a few thoughts, that I think are very compelling, but we should sit with them. And it makes me emotional, because when I think about you, Marv, it makes me a little emotional. Because I think, though things worked out very differently for you, you could have been George Floyd.
Oh, yeah.
You could have been Sean Ellis, and what Sean Ellis has gone through for decades now, because of, in his case, false arrest. That could have, and so, that really makes me emotional. And I know that was one of the things that Michelle Chalmers and I talked about. That was before the George Floyd incident, of course, when we had this initial conversation about your story, but it was after we knew about Sean Ellis. We've known about him for years. And so we that was something too that we reflected upon. And so I would hope that, we would all think about that, because by the grace of God, that those kinds of situations could have been your fate as well as the fate of my own two sons, who I am raising, have been raising in Needham and in this country. And so I just want to wish you well, Marv. I know that you and I will continue to be in touch. But I want to thank you for, being willing to come and talk to this community today, so that we could all get to know you better. I think it goes without saying that, we're in your corner. We continue to be in your corner, and just so happy and relieved that things worked out the way that they did for you. So thank you very much. We wish you well. Stay well, my friend. And
thank you. Thank you to Miss Michelle again. Thank you to Michelle everyone that's been fighting for this situation. To actually see myself cleared eventually was one of the biggest things for me, because after I went to that police station for the police report, they kind of just brushed it under the mat and sent me some retarded letter later saying that it's under investigation and there's basically nothing I can do about it. But with you guys' help, I was able to clear my name. And, they even tried to come back at me by saying they have me on video stealing 3 or 4 times from the place. And I'm just like, why would I be stealing if I work? I have 2 jobs. Right. You know what I mean? It's like, it was just sad. But I'm glad things worked out where I finally got my name cleared. You know, my clients can see that, you know, I'm an honest and fair person. And that's one of the biggest things that I take away from this, and I'm very grateful for.
Well, we're grateful for you, Marv. So thank you so much. And I look forward, like I said, I look forward to continuing to be in touch over time. And I hope that when folks see you hopping out of your car and going into the spa, that they'll kind of give you a nice salute and hello and chat and say hi. But thank you again. And, I'm just couldn't be more thrilled for the outcome for you. So wish your
Thank
family
you.
well and happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you. Happy holidays.
All right. Thank you, Marv.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. I think we're now moving on to our next segment. Excuse me. We have our breakout sessions that will begin promptly at 3:15. So
Wonderful. Well, here we are at the end of our day. Thank you so much for being with us, and especially for staying with us until the end. We are here together during the Festival of Diwali and celebrating light triumphing over darkness. Today, we have definitely done that. Today, we have great appreciation for our speakers, our panelists, and our workshop leaders, and the co-sponsors. Thank you all so much. We want to take a moment to congratulate two of our very own NDI board members, Gretchen Cook Anderson and Anna Geraldo Kerr, for being selected as the Metro West Needham Newton Chamber of Commerce. They were two of the most influential business people of color. We are very proud of them and so privileged to have you as a part of our community and on the leadership board of NDI. So thank you very much. While this may not have been the Summit 9.0 that we had imagined when we started planning in January, we have been heartened by the community engagement and response of our first virtual summit. We had over 400 people signed up, and we believe over 300 people joined us today. We know that along with David's spirit, his family has been with us today, and that has been very moving for all of us. So thank you very much as we remember David Summergrad today. 2020 has presented us with challenges we could not have imagined. A pandemic that has shown the great divides in our country, the racial and economic divides coming into our national consciousness in profound ways that will inspire generations to come to continue to push our work towards equity and a vision for the world and leadership where diversity is at the center. As we work to educate ourselves and one another, we must set out to do the work now that we know better, we must do better. We hope that you will take what you have learned today and remember that we must challenge ourselves, our friends and our family, and our community leaders to continue to do the work beyond the yard signs. In the chat, you will find a link that will allow you to provide us an easy feedback form that you can submit. We will also be sending this out with our thank you note. Please take a moment to share something valuable that you will take with you from this summit, something you've learned, something you may plan to share with others, or an action that you hope to take. And lastly, we encourage you to join us for our next Zoom event, the Trial 4 Discussion Group with special guest Stephanie Roberts-Hartung on Tuesday, December 8th from 7:30 to 9. Stephanie is a Needham resident and was a part of the New England Innocence Project and Sean Ellis's legal team. For those of you who don't know, Sean Ellis is a Boston man who was falsely accused of the murder of a police officer and imprisoned for over 20 years. He attended Needham Public Schools for some of his education and was a guest speaker last year at the Summit 8.0. The documentary is available on Netflix and we encourage you all to read it. Thank you so much for being with us here today. And we really appreciate your energy and enthusiasm. And we look forward to doing more work with you to make Needham a more equitable and community for all. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And I see people are signing off. Thank you for your time and energy. And what a day.